You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together we are the Bills guys, and this show is presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. For all you guys commenting in the comment section, don't worry, we're not ignoring you. This is a pre-recorded episode of the Air Raid Hour. Unfortunately, both Dave and myself had some responsibilities to attend to this Saturday afternoon. So catch this pregame show. Feel free to comment along, have a conversation in the comment section, but we're not being rude to you when we when we don't put your things up on the screen, and we'll get back to being live next week. So before we get started, 10-3 Bills are taking on the 8-5 Dolphins in what is expected to be a snowy Highmark Stadium. A win clinches the Bills a playoff spot, fourth year in a row for the Buffalo Bills if they can do it. It would put them a win versus the Bears away from an AFC East title. And obviously, the Buffalo Bills continue to try and clinch that AFC 1 seed, which they currently control, and that home field advantage in the playoffs. Dave, what's your confidence level heading into this game against the reeling Dolphins?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because my confidence, I kind of vary on this because the Dolphins right now are coming into this game. Well, they should have been coming into this game with pretty much no pressure on them, right? Like they've been playing poorly. The Bills have won obviously their 4 in a row. And at its face value, you would say there's more pressure on the Bills to win this game. It obviously gives them the playoff clinching win. It puts them effectively 3.5 games up on the Dolphins for the division, and they're playing at home in what would appear to be conditions that, in theory, would favor the Bills. So to me, like the pressure almost sort of dissipated from the Dolphins in this game, as much as it is a game where the Dolphins really need to win. A lot of the pressure, I think, is on the Bills in this game to actually show that they can kind of continue this Dolphins cold streak of the last 2 weeks and kind of put it to them and put the clamps down. Now, the Dolphins added some unneeded pressure to themselves with all these, wish it was colder shirts from Mike McDaniel and things like that, which is like somewhat bulletin board material. But my confidence level is high, but I would say that like there is an added bit of pressure, I think, on the Bills to perform this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressure on the Buffalo Bills because of what happened in week 3. We've already lost to this team once. They're in our division. Yep. We lost to them in their elements. If they come and beat us in our elements, that sort of maybe shows sort of like a shifting of the tide or makes Bills fans feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially when with these conditions, we expect to win a football game like this. But I do still think, I disagree with you a little bit. I still think the pressure's on the Dolphins because of the way they're reeling. Because of some of the games that they've dropped as of late. This is a measuring stick game for them to show that they're really, truly still contenders in the AFC, because we're going to start talking about Tua in a little bit. If Tua can't deliver down the stretch, if Tua has to start going to these cities in December and putting up numbers in the elements, and he can't do that, that's not going to bode well for the psyche of Dolphins fans heading into the playoffs and for the franchise heading into 2023 if he can't deliver this time of year. All right, before we get rolling on to our next subject here, this podcast is presented by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassos.net, and if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. Speaking of Miami coming here and playing in the elements, We talked about the 1 seed just now as well, and why it's important to keep stacking these wins and to clinch that 1 seed and to win one more or just as many games as the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills are 9-1 in their last 10 December and January home games. In that span, they are +5 turnover differential and +140 in point differential. So the Buffalo Bills, despite the fact that we oftentimes question whether this team is built for the elements, they have delivered in Orchard Park this time of the year. Expected temperatures for this this Saturday night, below freezing. Snow is in the forecast. The Dolphins last week heated their seats when it was just barely below 60 degrees in Los Angeles. So far, as you mentioned earlier with Mike McDaniel and his shirt, the Dolphins have been sort of downplaying the weather, going with the mind over matter approach. How big of an advantage do you think this weather will be for the Buffalo Bills? Is it as big of an advantage as I personally think it is this Saturday night?
It's interesting because the Dolphins are the variable here as far as like teams coming in, playing in these conditions, like similar conditions maybe to some other games the Bills have played in the past. I think on the surface, it should be an advantage to the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
The Bills, for all their critiques that we've had on them about the consistency on offense and things like that, they still have been like one of the best rushing offenses yardage wise from a raw statistics standpoint in the better part of the last season and a half. I think of the longest 100-yard rushing streak in the NFL. And this is why we were clamoring for more of that against the Jets last week, and they kind of went away from it, and we saw kind of how that game tightened up. The Bills will have an advantage, I think, in these conditions just because of the fact of the team they're playing against Miami. I don't think this mind over matter approach is something that I would have would have been not been the approach I would have taken if I was Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins. To making the comment about it snows in Alabama too. Like, I don't think they understand what they're going to be walking into.
Mm-hmm.
And while I do think that the Dolphins' defensive front is going to be a big challenge for the Bills, and that could be an equalizer in this game, you would normally say, as we saw in the Jets game last week, these bad weather conditions can tend to shrink the game or condense the game and kind of make them closer just by the natural effect of like possessions being sloppier, teams not scoring as much. These games tend to be closer games. And so I do still give the Bills an advantage, and I do like some of the matchups they have, but there are others I don't. So I think it's an advantage for the Bills for sure. They've been practicing outside. They're more used to the conditions. Miami may be overconfident in the lack of effect that the weather will have. So I think that all does add up to an advantage for the Bills. But as we'll get into, there are still some matchups I'm worried about.
Yeah, there's a ton of different matchups in this game, and we're going to start talking about them in a second here, but let's touch on injuries real quick. Obviously, we're pre-recording this. We are doing this on Wednesday afternoon. So the Buffalo Bills have already declared their players out who are not going to be playing this week.
Thursday afternoon,
excuse me. The Dolphins have not. So looking at the injury reports, let's start with the Buffalo Bills. Likely to play are Ed Oliver, Reggie Gilliam, and Matt Milano. All three of those are huge. The Bills have already ruled out Jordan Phillips and Ryan Bates. I particularly think the Ryan Bates injury is huge because Christian Wilkins is playing some really good football right now. Yep. And Ryan Bates, I thought in that New York game, was the best offensive lineman the Buffalo Bills had until he got hurt. I thought he was playing the best football. Obviously, Dawkins was playing on that bum ankle. Spencer Brown is still struggling. I thought Ryan Bates was the best one out there. He looked the best out there until that injury. So that's a big one for the Buffalo Bills. What do you think about the Bills declaring Ryan Bates and Jordan Phillips out for this game?
I mean, it sucks that Jordan Phillips is out. I think from a matchup standpoint, this is a game like, yeah, sure, revenge game narrative for him, fine. But like, this is a game maybe the Bills like could afford to be without Jordan Phillips. Miami is not a great rushing team. And we'll get into that in a bit. Like, I think there's a misperception out there that they are some great rushing team, but they're really not. So Jordan Phillips, like, I'd rather him, get healthy. Don't put him out there in this situation. The Bills' defensive line has been performing really well the last few weeks, even without Von Miller, especially on the interior with Settle, Daquan Jones, and Ed Oliver. And obviously, you mentioned Oliver trending towards playing. For me, the bigger loss is Bates, right? And you mentioned Wilkins. Wilkins had his way with that interior Chargers offensive line the other night. Although the Dolphins lost, I mean, he was getting in the backfield. He was making tackles in the backfield on a really good running back in Austin Eckler. And he just kind of he can take over a game from that perspective. So this is one of the things in a matchup like this where conditions potentially going to be tough, footing's going to be tough. It worries me, and it worries me as to who that might be that slides in there. Is it going to be Quessenberry? Is it going to be Greg Van Roten? I'm not really particularly excited about either of those prospects, but and then you obviously have to worry about his pass rushing ability up the middle as well. Josh, obviously great at escaping pressure and escaping the pocket, but again, with conditions like this, is he going to be as agile? Is the footing going to allow him to do things like that as easily, where Christian Wilkins could really wreck this game?
Yeah, I mean, looking at who could slot into that right guard position, David Quessenberry, I think, is my preferred option. It's likely going to be Greg Van Roten. And then there's always the wild card of Ike Budker, who Sean McDermott said this week he could be activated off the 21-day PUP window, and he could be active on Saturday night. Even if he is active, I would be surprised if he was active as a starter. But you always have that wild card there in Ike Budker, and it wouldn't be a completely out of left field shock if Ike Budker finds his way onto the field on Saturday night. That's just sort of how much the Bills have struggled in replacing some of these interior offensive linemen when they have been injured this season. Feel a little bit better with Jordan Phillips this week. Ed Oliver's also hurting, which it's like, okay, now you start to panic because CJ Brewer only played 8 snaps last week. Well, luckily for the Bills, Houston Texans released Brandon Bryant from their practice squad, and he was quickly signed to the Buffalo Bills active roster. So a sturdy presence who has been here, who's probably likely going to get way more than the 8 snaps that CJ Brewer got against the Jets. Brandon Bryant gives me a little bit more reassurance because Ed Oliver is playing with that injured pec as well. On to the Dolphins. Some key injuries for the Dolphins here. Teron Armstead with his knee. They're optimistic that he's going to play, but Miami's offensive line has been a problem this year. And if Teron Armstead can't go, or even if he's dinged because he was getting beat last week by some of the Chargers edge rushers, that's huge, especially in these conditions for the Miami Dolphins. Speak on the Teron Armstead injury a little bit.
Well, when healthy, he's their best offensive lineman. He's obviously their big money acquisition. And for the fact is that even if he does play, what is his percentage of health going to be? We kind of had the same conversation about Deion Dawkins last week. Like, yeah, sure, he's active, but like it was evident that he was laboring and he wasn't himself. So yes, even if Teron Armstead plays for the Dolphins, is he going to be 100%? How effective is he going to be? Rousseau has really turned on his game lately. We saw him last week really kind of do a lot of nice work, and he would be matched up if he's on that right side against Teron Armstead. And I like that matchup. The really high prize free agent, really solid all-pro level left tackle when healthy, but at less than 100%, can Gregory Rousseau take advantage of that matchup? Part of me is like, okay, let him play and be less than 100% and take advantage. But then part of me is like, well, is a 80% Teron Armstead still better than their backup? Probably so. But in any case, this is a big deal for the Bills. Tua has only been sacked 17 times all year, second fewest of any quarterback who's played in at least 10 games. Only Andy Dalton's been sacked less. I know it's kind of a weird stat, but he gets the ball out quickly. We'll see how much of an advantage or how much that even plays into this more with if Teron Armstead is less than 100.
Yeah, another big injury the Dolphins are dealing with is Eric Rowe. He's likely out with a concussion, which puts our guy Verone McKinley in the mix to get some safety snaps for the Miami Dolphins. But that's a big one, especially like work in the middle of the field. Eric Rowe sort of plays that rover position. He can move into the nickel for the Miami Dolphins if needed. He's a very versatile defender in that secondary for them. And it's not looking good for him with a concussion this week. Thoughts on Eric Rowe being out and how the Buffalo Bills can exploit that?
Yeah, especially in this game, right, where you expect there to be maybe a little bit more activity around the line of scrimmage or over the short middle areas of the field. Like, he can roam in a lot of different places. And like you said, he's versatile. He can help the Dolphins disguise things. And without him, they may have to be a little bit more vanilla with what they do on defense, which hopefully in a game where maybe we're going to talk about the Bills' quick passing attack being trying to go toe for toe with Miami's. That's a big loss for them. And their DBs have struggled for the most part this season as well. None of them have really graded out well per PFF as it is. Xavier Howard's like only the 78th rated corner per them. They have very few takeaways from that secondary on the season. So without Rowe, it's going to hurt them. And I think it should help the Bills from a pre-snap read standpoint, and it should help them really from an execution standpoint over the short middle areas of the field.
The last major injury right now that the Dolphins are working through is a big one considering the elements in this game. And that's running back Jeff Wilson, injured his hip against the Chargers. Mike McDaniel in a press conference this week called him a warrior, said he's doing everything he can to get out on the field on Saturday. Who knows whether, in fact, he is active or not. But the way Mike McDaniel is talking, running backs are going to be a big part of Miami's game plan against the Buffalo Bills. Jeff Wilson really, their offense was good, but Jeff Wilson really gave them that power element, allowed them to do some Shanahan style type of runs. Raheem Mostert kind of showed that he's more of a secondary back, not a primary back. And Jeff Wilson was carrying some of that load for the Miami Dolphins. This is a big blow to them if he cannot play or he's severely limited on Saturday.
Big blow because, like you mentioned, in these conditions, it should not really set up as well for a guy like Raheem Mostert, who's kind of made his hay on speed and kind of that one cut, that one cut zone running scheme that Shanahan runs. Like in these conditions where footing might be a problem, sure, it only takes one play for maybe the Bills to lose their footing on defense, but by and large, you would expect that this to be more of a power back style game. And if Jeff Wilson's not there, which by the way, he's not just a power back, he's a pretty good all around running back. So let's give him even that credit. This combination that the Dolphins now have with Mostert and Wilson is pretty good. Getting rid of Chase Edmonds, which was a weird signing anyway to begin with. They've really improved that duo. And without Wilson, a big load potentially on Raheem Mostert too, which I don't know that it sets up well in these conditions for them. So if you're a Bills fan, you're obviously not rooting for injury. He's already injured, but you are hoping maybe that Jeff Wilson does not play in this game.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, since we're on the topic of Jeff Wilson, let's just go right into, we're going to reverse the order a little bit today. Let's go into how the Miami Dolphins try to scheme or game plan on offense against this Buffalo Bills defense. One statistic that I wanted to get to earlier, I forgot to. Tua Tagovailoa has played 2 career games in the National Football League when the temperature is under 40 degrees. He was at the Buffalo Bills in 2021 and at the Tennessee Titans in 2020. Against the Bills, he had a 58.2 passer rating. Against the Titans, he had a 53.1 passer rating in games under 40 degrees. So if Tua Tagovailoa has a good game on Saturday, it will literally be the first and only time he's ever had a good game in cold weather. Now, he downplayed it, said it snowed in Alabama. He's been flamed for that. If we were doing Jabroni of the Week this week, he would be one of the Jabronis of the Week for that comment. I think he and Mike McDaniel are both just sort of sick and tired of the media bringing it up again and again and again. But this is the storyline that's going to dictate this game, and these conditions and adapting to these conditions could decide who wins this football game. So what does Miami do when you quite possibly have a limited quarterback? You might possibly be without your number one running back, and your go-to move, taking the top off the defense, might not be available to you in these weather conditions. How do you think Miami approaches this Buffalo Bills defense and attacks them in this game?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, right, if Kaiir Elam gets a lot of run this week in a game that really should set up well for him, more of a press man type style, I would think, against these receivers. We saw the Chargers be successful in that last week, and the conditions, right? Like I said, you like to think that this game is going to be played closer to the line of scrimmage. So if you're the Dolphins, I do think with Tua and potentially Armstead being dinged up, you still have to go to that quick passing game. You still have to be the type of team that kind of gets the ball out quickly. Like I mentioned, he's only been sacked 17 times all year. The Dolphins are, the number one overall DVOA passing offense. Obviously not because of just Tua, but Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. So they're going to have to really rely on that quick passing game and yards after the catch in a game that's going to be played close to the line of scrimmage. So if I'm Miami, I'm challenging the Bills and I'm saying we're gonna dare you to play press man. We're gonna make some adjustments after the game we had last week against the Chargers, and we're gonna come out and see if your guys are up to the task, because ultimately I don't know that you're going to have a situation where you can air it out a ton in this game. The other thing that I think I would do if I was the Dolphins, again, in these conditions, like defense gets rolling downhill, harder to stop, harder to kind of change direction. Like a guy like Raheem Mostert could do damage in the screen game against you if you're the Bills. And that's an area where maybe not necessarily the traditional running game for the Dolphins has worked out too well this year. But Mostert, again, fast guy, can catch the ball out of the backfield, with footing being a potential issue and the Bills kind of coming downhill with that pass rush against a depleted offensive line of Miami. The screen game is something that, by and large, the Bills have not defended well over the course of the season. So I think it's going to be a lot of quick passing from Miami and a lot of screens from Miami. And that's what I would be doing if I was them.
You mentioned a little nugget earlier where the Chargers had a lot of success running press man against the Miami Dolphins and just getting physical with guys like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill at the line of scrimmage. The Chargers played the most man-to-man defense against the Miami Dolphins this year since their week 3 matchup with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills actually ran more man coverages in that game than the Chargers did to success on Sunday night, which is interesting since the Buffalo Bills were rocking Jamarcus Ingram in the second half of that football game. So I thought that was an interesting nugget. The Bills actually played more press man. So you might see Kyrie Elam in this football game. But to me, what still scares me is that Mike McDaniel is a Kyle Shanahan disciple. So as you mentioned, it's sort of people just assume they're a good running team, but they aren't really a good running team. I still think that they, with a week of practice and a week of focusing on it, could have it in them. And I think Mike McDaniel definitely has between the ears the ability to call a game that is highly successful in these weather conditions. Whether these players can go out there and execute it or not, that's another question entirely. But this is a defense or offense that might not have the ability to take the top off. And they've been struggling in the run game this year. So they've made the comment, this offense is so predicated on working the ball down the field, working deep passes, 10+ yard passes, 20+ yard passes. They like to push the ball down the field and utilize the speed that they have. Tua is either not taking or they're showing an inability to sort of do the underneath stuff. They're having very similar troubles to what the Buffalo Bills had. So I think you're going to see, and they've been sort of hinting at that this week in their press conferences, is you mentioned the screen game, just the running backs in general getting involved in the passing game, I think is going to be a huge part of what the Miami Dolphins try to accomplish this week. I think they try to get the ball into the hands of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in short yardage and let them create yak. I think they try to get the ball into Raheem Mostert's hand on dump offs. They try to get the ball into Jeff Wilson if he plays in his hand on dump offs, not just screens, but just getting the ball in the hands of these running backs, getting the ball in the hands of these wide receivers and letting them create. So the Buffalo Bills have to play very disciplined defense and they have to tackle really well, which is something that this Buffalo defense has struggled with. Bill Belichick even said going into the Patriots game, we're just going to dump it off the entire game because they can't tackle for shit. It backfired. Mac Jones got really mad. That's essentially what Bill Belichick or Mac Jones said about the Patriots game plan. Coaches told me these guys can't tackle. We're just going to dump the ball off all game, let our guys create. And it didn't happen. And Mac Jones got frustrated. So the Buffalo Bills have to frustrate Tua the same way that they frustrated Mac Jones. And they have to wrap up and they have to be secure in their tackling. The Dolphins are 3rd overall in DVOA, though. So a very good offense. Hopefully these weather conditions can sort of ground that offense a little bit. All right. The Buffalo Bills offense. We're 25 minutes in and we haven't even mentioned the Cole Beasley edition. Buffalo getting a little bit of Cole for Christmas, as I heard a couple of people saying on social media. But the Miami Dolphins are 17th in DVOA. They've lost Emmanuel Ogbah for the season, which is a huge loss for them. They're going to be down Eric Rowe. They have Christian Wilkins in the middle of that defense. They have Melvin Ingram, Bradley Chubb, and Jalen Phillips. They have some dynamic edge rushers. They've got some names on this defense, but Josh Boyer, the defensive coordinator, Miami Dolphins fans are not pleased with the performance of this defense and with Josh Boyer's play calling this year. How do you what Miami Dolphins defense do you think shows up, and how do the Buffalo Bills go about attacking this defense?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it like the raw statistics in DVOA, and you would say, at least on the surface, that this lines up at least somewhat with what the Dolphins are good at. They're the number 7 rush defense based on raw statistics, number 8 in DVOA. They're only 22nd against the pass in DVOA. They are allowing 24 points per game on defense. They're a bottom 10 pass defense on raw statistics. So conditions wise, you probably like this if you're Miami, because if the conditions don't allow as much passing as maybe you would normally expect, like, this lines up with your strength, which has been your rush D. But again, like you mentioned, this defense overall has underperformed, bottom 10 in points per game allowed, bottom 3rd in overall yards per allowed a game. And this was a defense that was one of the top units, if I recall, maybe the top unit yardage wise 2 or 3 years ago. And they largely have got a lot of the same personnel plus additions like Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. So their secondary has really underperformed. And the Dolphins as a team only have 7 interceptions as a team on the season, which is near the bottom of the league. So if you're the Dolphins and you're looking at these conditions, you're probably sitting there like, yeah, sure, we'll take the Bills running the ball. We'll accept that. We'll hope that the conditions kind of force them into more of a traditional running game, or even Josh Allen running the ball, because our pass D really hasn't held up as good as we would have hoped this year, and we're not taking the ball away as much as we'd like through interceptions. So if you're the Bills, I think to the extent that you can put pressure on the Dolphins defense through the passing game, like, you should try, right? And it could be like the addition of Cole Beasley this week if he's active, which it seems like he might be, and Dawson Knox. Those are 2 guys I'm looking at over the middle of the field. Miami's coverage linebackers, Landon Roberts, not a great coverage linebacker. We mentioned already Eric Rowe being out for this game. So I expect that if the Bills want to try to pass the ball in this game over the middle of the field or near the line of scrimmage, in that box, in that, middle box, like, there's going to be plays to be had. So running against the strength of this Dolphins defense with Christian Wilkins up the middle without Ryan Bates, to me, seems like it's going to be a struggle. But what I will say is that I don't think the Bills they can't abandon the run, right? They still have to mix it in, because we saw last week against the Jets when they went too pass heavy early, it really kind of did them in, and they were playing a tight game all game. So this is a tough matchup, I think, for the Bills, because the conditions are going to be an equalizer to me.
Yeah, the conditions will be, very much an equalizer, and they will help the defense in a lot of situations, because again, it's tough to get your footing. It's tough to take the top off. Guys can sort of stay more towards the line of scrimmage. So the Buffalo Bills are going to have to be smart, and they're going to have another workman-like type of game plan. My biggest hope is that Cole Beasley really helps this Buffalo Bills team, specifically on 3rd down, and also opening up Gabriel Davis. Eric has done a great job pulling out some old Beasley clips, showing some of the things that Beasley does. He's an extension of the running game. The way that the Buffalo Bills can get the ball in his hands to pick up 6, 7, 8 yards, that'll be key to create those 3rd and short situations, to have a better EPA per play on 1st and 2nd down than the god-awful EPA per play they had in that Jets game. So maybe getting Cole Beasley worked in, not just on 3rd down, but on 1st and 2nd down, to make 3rd downs more manageable. And then, hey, maybe he opens up something for Gabriel Davis down the field, because Eric was showing a ton of those clips where Beasley was playing off of Davis in the slot, and how he was opening up things for Gabriel Davis because of how people had to respect Cole Beasley. What are your thoughts on Beasley playing? And if he does play, what type of impact he has in sort of, breathing a little, I'm not going to say breathe life into this offense, but bring a breath of fresh air to this offense?
Yeah, I think maybe even getting off to a faster start, right? Having a few more drives early in the game where you're sustaining and you're maybe scoring early in the game, really putting the pressure on the Dolphins early by getting scoring early. And that's something the Bills have struggled with lately, is scoring early in games. They know they've eventually settled in and kind of done that, but they've really had way too many short drives and 3 and outs than we all would like. And Cole Beasley, like you said, maybe even if it's not like playing every snap, which I don't expect him to be, but picking up some key yardage to making these down and distances more manageable, or even like you said on third down, helping move the chains. Miami's per PFF the 24th worst tackling team in the league. So Cole Beasley, with his shiftiness and including the conditions, if he can catch the ball 5 yards and even generate an extra 1 or 2 after the catch, like 7 yards versus 5 could be really be important in this game, right? If you're talking about like a 1st and 10 that becomes a 2nd and 10 because of an incompletion, then all of a sudden that you get a 5-yard pass with a little extra 2 yards after the catch. You go 3rd and 3 looks a lot better than 3rd and 5. 2nd and 2 looks a lot better than 2nd and 5. So like, to me, that's where he can make these little differences in the game.
And you want to know what? Like, one statistic that really shows where the Buffalo Bills are pressing a little bit, or maybe where they feel a little bit more uncomfortable, is, and I don't have the chart in front of me, so I don't have the precise data, but I can sort of summarize it. The Buffalo Bills are starting to trend in the wrong direction of running the ball on 2nd and 10. So, advanced analytic websites oftentimes track how many times does a team run the ball on 2nd and 10 to try to make it more third and manageable. And advanced statistics shows that running the ball on 2nd and 10 is not the wisest decision in the world. The Buffalo Bills are starting to trend in the wrong direction of running the ball on 2nd and 10 to try to make it more third and manageable, when that's really a down where you should be trying to get things through the air and pick up some chunk yardage and pick up some chunk plays. The Buffalo Bills aren't trusting whatever it is they're doing enough, and they're trying to hand the ball off to make it more of a third and manageable and to see what happens in the run game. So the Buffalo Bills are trending in the wrong direction there on 2nd and 10. The last thing I want to say about the Buffalo Bills offense is we lost to the Miami Dolphins. There's a number of reasons why we lost to the Miami Dolphins. The weather, the injuries, all those different things played a role in the Buffalo Bills losing. The defensive injuries played a role in the Buffalo Bills losing. The offensive line being down to literally 5 starters, one of them playing with a torn ACL, all sort of played a role. But at the end of the day, if you look at it, the Miami Dolphins did a very good job of giving the Bills everything they wanted between the 20s and shutting them down in the red zone. Gabe Davis's drop, Josh Allen skipping the ball to Isaiah McKenzie. We got all the yards, but we could not convert in the red zone, which has been a problem with this football team all year. So the Buffalo Bills need to make damn sure that they convert on their opportunities in the red zone and they're not kicking field goals, because in these conditions, in this weather, those field goals, despite how good Tyler Bass has been, is not a guarantee. You got to rely on touchdowns. In order to rely on touchdowns in a week like this, you got to be converting in the red zone. What are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills red zone offense this week?
Yeah, especially given the conditions, like touchdowns in this game are going to almost feel like maybe like 10 points, like 10 point plays, and like field goals are going to still feel like 3-point plays. I just, not to mention like how close or how far do you have to drive into opponent territory to even really give yourself a high likelihood that you're going to make a field goal in this game. Now, obviously they'll clear out like the turf and everything, but it's still difficult, right? It's still difficult. And as good as Tyler Bass has been, we don't want to be worrying about having to kick 40+ yard field goals in these conditions to potentially put a team away. Scoring in the red zone is hugely important. And I also will throw another thing that I wouldn't mind seeing in this game. I wouldn't mind seeing in this game when the Bills score touchdowns, considering going for 2 on some of the, depending on the situation in the game, and depending how bad the conditions really end up being. I wouldn't mind situationally the Bills going for 2 in some scenarios. Like we've seen Mike Tomlin do this in the past. We've seen others do this where they just go for 2, and not necessarily the traditional route, but I would not hate that if Sean McDermott got aggressive after scoring TDs and decided to go for 2 a few times.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to consider if you're the Buffalo Bills, because again, who knows what those conditions are going to look like on Saturday night. All right, finally wrapping it up here before we get to our superlative special teams. I was really surprised. Sanders is a good kicker. He's struggling a little bit this year. Obviously, their punter, Morstead not so much. He's really getting long in the tooth there. But you got guys like Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Javon Holland. All these guys you can count on in the return game. Yet DVOA, the Miami Dolphins are 31st in the NFL. And I was racking my brain. I'm like, how are they so bad? And then it just kind of clicked. Their special teams coordinator is Danny Crossman, who somehow survived the Adam Gase regime. But for me, what I'm really looking for on Saturday night is I need Nyheim Hines to channel his inner Chris Watson. I just need him to secure that football. I need him to be the punt catcher. I need the Buffalo Bills when they punt to pin them deep. I need Sam Martin to do a good job coffin cornering. I need them to execute on all their special teams plays, not get things like punt blocks, because in these weather conditions, fumbles on punt returns, fumbles or blocked punts, etc. These can be game-changing, game-deciding type of plays. So the Buffalo Bills have to make sure they execute perfectly on special teams, and they're going up against a team that doesn't execute perfectly on special teams, which I think is advantage Bills on special teams. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, advantage Bills, and this special teams is going to be heightened, right, in this game. So you really like that advantage for the Bills. Secure the ball if you're Nyheim Hines. And if you're the Bills, if you're Sam Martin and you're punting, like I would almost prefer him to punt. I don't want to say out of bounds because like I don't want to necessarily lose that yardage, but like I would ideally like to see a game where Miami doesn't even return a single punt. It's either fair caught or it's down inside the 20 or whatever, or it's kicked out of bounds. Like I don't even want to give them a chance to make a big play on special teams in an area where they really haven't made big plays all year. So look, I'm not telling Sam Martin to kick the ball out of bounds, but some coffin corners, if you're trying to get it inside the 5, like, okay, I'm not going to be too mad if it gets inside the 20, right? Like, I just don't want them returning any punts. And then
I see where you're coming from, but I'm going to take I'm going to take the devil's advocate route, punt it, get some good hang time on that, and make that dude catch the ball in these conditions. Like, because
that's fair.
Because in these conditions, maybe snow, snow's not as bad. Like last week when it's that wintry mix, which is, I never heard it called a wintry mix before. I always just called it slush, but that where it's like, it's not quite cold enough to freeze.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this like hardened, slippery rain. That stuff is hard. You saw the Buffalo Bills dropping passes. You saw Nyheim Hines almost give us a heart attack. It's a little bit easier, I think, in the snow because the snow is less sort of slippery than that wintry mixture. But I wouldn't mind seeing Sam Martin just kick it sky high and make those dudes field it. But it'll be interesting. All right, time to get into our pregame superlatives. And if you are watching along with us, apologies again for not being able to put your pregame superlatives up here, but feel free to share them in the comment section and have a conversation as we roll through here. And we're going to start, as always, with the Take Me Higher player of the game, the major Bills player that needs to step up in order for the Buffalo Bills to achieve victory this Saturday.
Can you take me higher to a place where blind men see?
All right. As always, Josh Allen is off limits. So, Dave, who are you going with for your Take Me Higher player of the game? Who's a big name player that's got to step up?
I'm going back to the well again this week after I went with Dawson Knox last week. A little bit of momentum, led the team in receiving last week. As far as catches, the Miami Dolphins are 29th in DVOA defense against the tight end. A lot of action expected in this game, close to or near the line of scrimmage in the short middle areas of the field. I would love to see Dawson Knox in the snow get angry, take some guys out, make these throws in these tough conditions a little easier on Josh, get the ball in Dawson Knox's hands. Like I mentioned, Landon Roberts, not a great coverage backer. Baker is a little bit better, but neither of them are exceptional. So I like Dawson Knox maybe to continue that momentum that he picked up a little bit of momentum from last week, where they definitely made an effort to get him the ball, and that to continue this week. So give me Dawson Knox, who's had some really good games against Miami in the past, to step up and take this Bills team higher this week.
I like it. And I'm actually, I'm going to repeat a player that I used last week as well, but I used him for a different one. I used him for my hot take segment. I'm going back to Gregory Rousseau as
Love
my
it.
take me higher player of the game. Not only is Von Miller out, but Ed Oliver is sort of a little questionable as well. How dominant is he going to be with his pec strain? So if you're the Buffalo Bills, it's going to take a village. It's going to take everyone along that defensive line rotation, especially with a guy like Teron Armstead injured, a guy like Austin Jackson. You have to be able to get into his face. You have to be able to pressure Tua, make him feel uncomfortable, even though he gets the ball out quick. You have to be able to stop the run with 4 guys. All of these things that you have to do. And Gregory Rousseau is the one who has to lead the way. He's a first-round pick. He's healthy now. He's the best and healthiest player on the defensive line because Ed Oliver's hurt. So he's got to lead the way. He's got to lead by example in this football game. So I'm going with Gregory Rousseau. Bat balls down, get sacks, be a menace in the run game, apply pressure to Tua, get your hand in his face, make him feel uncomfortable. He's got to lead the way. Obviously, other guys like Shaq Lawson, etc., the other interior defensive lineman, Daquan Jones, Boogie Basham, AJ Panessa, they all got to step up. But Gregory Rousseau has to lead the way. So I'm going with Gregory Rousseau as my take me higher player of the game. And that leads us to our wild card player of the game, a surprise player who could step up and help the Buffalo Bills achieve victory this Saturday.
Guys, why aren't the brakes working?
Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
All right. So, Dave, who is your surprise player of the game?
I mean, doesn't it like set up for Cole Beasley in this game? I mean, to be like the wild card, like he's going to get called up from the practice squad. He's going to have potentially an impact. And this is a game where, based on the conditions, based on what we think could happen with this Bills offensive line against this really strong Miami defensive front, you know, the Bills' quick passing attack has got to be on. So I'll take Cole Beasley as the obvious choice here for a wild card player. Don't know how many snaps he's going to play, but I would imagine that, look, there's 4 games left in the season. This is crunch time for the Bills. This is a huge game against Miami. I think they're going to try to integrate him in to this offense. It's not like a Nyheim Hines where they got in a trade and he wasn't familiar. Like Cole Beasley should be familiar enough and have that trust still from Josh Allen to make a wild card impact in this game.
Every video you saw of Cole Beasley at Bills practice, who was he catching a ball from?
Josh Allen.
It was not Matt Barkley or Case Keenum. So my expectation is Cole Beasley. You know, John Brown played less. John Brown doesn't play special teams. John Brown played 3 snaps last week. The Buffalo Bills clearly can afford to have Cole Beasley out there, even if it's just for 15, 20 snaps in this in this football game. They can afford to have that extra roster spot and have him there, even if they only have a small handful of plays that they can run with him this week. My wild card player of the game, I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to pick 3 players. And one of these 3 players will step up and make a play. And I'm going to do something I've never done, I think, for my wild card player of the game. And I'm going to go with a special teams player. I think one of Tyler Matakevich, Saran Neal, or Taiwan Jones makes a play in this football game. A forced fumble, a huge, tackle on special teams, etc. They force the fumble. They get a turnover on special teams. So one of Matakevich, Neal, or Jones will cause a turnover on special teams that will flip the field for the Buffalo Bills and will help lead them to victory this Saturday night. So one of those 3 guys is going to make a play.
Okay. I like that. It could be a hot take too.
Up next is our respect me player of the game, a player on the opposing team that the Buffalo Bills they got to respect.
I pure, straight hate you. But God damn it, do I respect you.
We spent a great deal of time talking about Christian Wilkins already. We haven't really touched too much on any other player like Tyreek, like we usually do because of the weather conditions, but who is your respect me player of the game?
Yeah, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, obviously good candidates for that. Jeff Wilson would be a good candidate if he plays, but I'm gonna go with I'm gonna take a lead from you and go with 2 guys that have the same number of sacks on the season, and that's Jalen Phillips and Melvin Ingram on the edges for Miami. We talked a lot about the potential of Ryan Bates being, Ryan Bates' absence being a liability up the middle for Christian Wilkins. But again, Spencer Brown has been struggling. Deion Dawkins, is he close to 100%? The footing here is going to be crucial here in slowing down these guys on the edge, Jalen Phillips, obviously Bradley Chubb's there too, and Melvin Ingram. So to me, this respect you players are kind of maybe the guys that don't get talked about as much as the edges worry me in this game for Miami.
And hey, Bradley Chubb is due for his game as well. So he's another guy on the edge for that team to go along. They got a trio of really solid edge rushers there. Last time I went with Javon Holland. He had a really good game. I think everyone at this point knows how much I love Javon Holland. We ended up getting Gregory Rousseau, so it all worked out. But I wanted Javon Holland with the 30th pick in that draft. Yeah. He's one of my favorite players in the National Football League. He's so good. I'm going to switch it up this time. I'm going to go with Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki has not caught a pass in the last 3 games for the Miami Dolphins. He's due. He is due. And in these conditions, his ability to go up, make contested catches, make the difficult catches, work the sidelines, the red zone threat that he is. I am worried that the Miami Dolphins could be targeting and utilizing a guy who's just been pretty much getting some good cardio in the last 3 weeks, and that's Mike Gesicki. Guy hasn't caught a pass in 3 weeks. He's due. Don't sleep on him. Buffalo, make sure he is accounted for in these conditions. A guy like Mike Gesicki can make those game-changing plays. So my respect me player of the game is going to Dolphins tight end Mike Gesicki, who probably has no future in Miami because Mike McDaniel does not like his non-blocking tight ends. All right, time for our hot take of the game.
Oh my God! We're having a fire sale! Oh, the burning! It burns me! Evacuate all the school children! Oh, mate! This isn't a fever! Sing, Greg! Can't even see where the knob is!
My favorite's the telephone at the end. I don't know why it's the telephone at the end that gets me, the telephone ring at the end of that clip. But all right, what is your hottest take heading into this football game?
I think the Bills are really going to struggle running the ball in this game, even though I think they're going to try to. Like the edge defenders on Miami are good run defenders. Wilkins is obviously a beast in the middle. We're not going to have Bates. I think James Cook is going to struggle running the ball. I think Singletary will have a little more success running the ball than Cook, but I don't think the Bills are going to have a ton of success running the ball. And a guy that we still have Stephon Diggs, right? Yeah, we still do, right? Okay. Yeah. I feel like he's ready to just like make his mark on this game. Like we're not talking a lot about him because of these conditions. We're talking a lot about Cole Beasley signing, rightfully so, but like I feel like Stephon Diggs is kind of quietly lurking, like waiting to just have like a huge game. And it's kind of contrarian because of like what the conditions might look like. But like he's had really good games against the Dolphins, and that Dolphins secondary has struggled this year. Definitely haven't performed up to snuff. And so I like, as a hot take, I'll say Stephon Diggs clears 100 receiving yards and adds a touchdown in a game where conditions are not set up for that.
I like it as well. I'm going receiver as well with my hot take of the game. Last week, Isaiah McKenzie was targeted 3 times on 3rd down. He dropped 2 of them and converted the other. This week, Cole Beasley converts 3 or more 3rd downs for the Buffalo Bills. That is my hot take of the game. And that leads us now into our game prediction.
We're sending you back to the future.
Back to the future! Back to the future! Back to the future! Back to the future! Back to the future!
All right, take us back to the future, Dave. What is your prediction for this football game?
What was that week 17 game a couple years ago where Miami came into Buffalo and just got absolutely trounced by like Antonio
Williams and co. Matt Barkley.
I'd love to see somewhat of a repeat of that. I think it's going to be tighter game than probably people want, kind of like the Jets game. But I think the Bills, I just feel like the Bills now have a blueprint against Miami, and they've really had played pretty good defense against Miami the last time out, other than that one, big play to Waddle down the middle. They got a lot of the guys back on defense for this game that they didn't have last time out. Jordan Poyer, Trey White. We have Edmonds and Milano looking like he's going to play as well. So the Bills defensively, outside of, Jordan Phillips and obviously Vaughn being out, looks like they're in pretty good shape health-wise on the defensive side of the ball. And I just feel like this team is ready to make a statement and just put Miami away and finally put something together where we come away from this game and we say that was 4 quarters of football. Cole Beasley's back. We squish the fish. Bills come out and eventually pull away in this game and make it a situation where there's a lot of laughs and smiling going on in the fourth quarter. So give me Bills 27, Miami Dolphins 14.
Yeah, I like that. I got a similar score. I'm going Bills 24, Dolphins 13. I think the Buffalo Bills, again, they do exactly what they did against New England. They do exactly what they get against the Jets. There'll be a lot of people after the game where they're like, well, it wasn't the prettiest in the world, but they're just going to have a workman-like. They're going to have a workman. They're not going to blow the doors off the Miami Dolphins. They're not blowing the doors off teams right now, and that's okay. They're just getting workman-like W's. They're stacking W's. They're beating divisional opponents. So I think the Buffalo Bills are going to go in this weather. They're going to play a workman-like football game. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're not going to make any key mistakes. They're going to convert better in the red zone, accumulate at least 3 touchdowns to get to that 24-point total. And the Miami Dolphins, I think, are just going to struggle in these weather conditions. They're going to struggle to not move the ball, but they're going to struggle to score points, especially with some of the personnel that they have. So I think the Buffalo Bills win comfortably 24-13. I just don't think Miami is going to be able to handle these conditions in Orchard Park on Saturday night. All right. That will do it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?